They saw a 24% higher return on investment than ads without integrated sonic branding or bespoke elements. Hey, episode 5. Luke, we've made it past the threshold of attention span. And we are still here with a 5th episode.
Us go.
This will put us halfway through the first series. I think that's a big achievement.
Halfway. Wow. Congratulations.
And to you, my friend. So we are a creative music agency called Hear Me Out, helping brands use sound strategically. We've helped brands with a combined revenue of over 1 billion to use sound to unlock value that only sound can.
And this is the Hear Me Out podcast, which George was supposed to lead with, but you have clicked on it, so we're going to assume you know that. And this first season is all about misconceptions that we come up against every single day. We go through a misconception, and then we either say it is true or it is false. And we always like to start these by saying, we are a sonic branding creative music agency. Sonic branding we consider to be any time a brand uses sound at any touch point at all. Now, number 5, George, which we're going to discuss and decide whether it's a misconception, is sound doesn't make that much of an impact. It's a nice to have, not a necessity.
Ooh, you bitch.
Straight to the heart.
How could you say that?
Straight to the heart.
Well,
what do you reckon? Hit me.
It's absolutely not worth even entertaining.
Great.
See you later.
Done. See ya.
Bye.
Bye. Mic drop.
You are not a client for us, Luke Mosley. No.
Good.
Well, I think what we need to do in this episode is go back to the roots of what we talked to people about initially on first call, first conversation. Don't think about sonic branding as sound. Think of it as a tool. And I think this episode should delve into why we say that. And we essentially now just completely remove the idea of sound, don't we, in the first conversation, because really it's a marketing and it's a branding conversation, rather than trying to get people to think, it'd be nice for us to have music. It would be nice for us to think about what sound is going to be on this ad. There's way more to it. People don't.
It almost needs to be made more utilitarian so that people take it seriously, because it's so much fun that people think it can't be effective. I think almost when you start to talk to people that are responsible for big budgets, well, they know it has an impact or whatever, but because everyone loves music on the whole, it's fundamentally, it's I shouldn't really, anything I enjoy this much, should it really be can it really be an effective part of my job that's usually a little bit more, what's the right word? More cutthroat, I suppose, and needing to justify its place and its purpose. Because music doesn't need to sorry, I realize I've just hijacked what you were about to say. But music doesn't really ever have to justify its place or purpose in your life. Whereas everything else in the branding world, it sort of has to justify its spend and its time for its purpose.
Well, I think something we learned last year that supports that in terms of how I think it sits in people's minds is we learned a crazy statistic that when a brand uses sound in marketing and branding, it's only 4% of the budget that gets put towards music. And I have never spoken to anybody that thinks that music only has an impact of 4% onto a campaign, onto a brand, onto anything. A guy I spoke to on Friday, he was like, I actually think music has 80% impact on the emotion and how the emotion of the ad is translated. He does beautiful drone shots, makes amazing footage for high-end brands like National Trust. And he was like, if the music is wrong, those beautiful morning drone shots, deer running across the hills.
Behind it, be like, what the fuck am I watching?
Exactly. So if you think about that as a statistic in itself, only 4% of budget gets spent on music. And if you if you agree that it has much more of an impact than 4%, then you're listening to the right podcast, because we're going to delve deeper into exactly why we try and get people to not think it's a nice to have, because I think that is the problem, right? We get drafted in the last 48 hours of an ad being created, and they're like, we need a song for this ad. It's Wednesday at this point, and we need it in by Friday. And we're like, you've created this whole concept, this whole piece. Like, surely you've edited it already to another track. So you're editing the pace of the edit, the emotion that you're already conveying through the edit, and the concept and the idea, the way you filmed it, what music was being played on set, what were people acting to, all of these questions have already been decided by the music you've already used, and you're expecting us to match that or enhance that in the last 48 hours. And that seems crazy to me. So it's a big mission of ours, actually, is to get the conversation of music way earlier into strategic conversations, whether it's branding, marketing, etc., etc.
Well, exactly. And so to the misconception, why isn't it a nice to have, I guess is what people might be saying. Like, if the misconception that we're trying to debunk is music doesn't really have an impact, I suppose, my brain would naturally say, if you agree with that and you're thinking, prove me wrong, Luke, prove me wrong, then just change the sound to find your favorite scene in a movie, Gladiator or something like that, and then put on a kid's TV show soundtrack, put on Baby Shark behind it or something like that. And you can see instantly that it has an impact.
It's like feel instantly. Yeah,
well, exactly. Yeah, sorry, exactly. You can close your eyes. Visuals are stupid anyway. It's all about sound, George. Then you can see it has an impact. But for some reason, it's like this weird... It's when we explain it to people in terms of music and how much it can change the perception of a piece of visual content, everyone really clicks with it. But yet it's it has the tendency to be so low on a priority list. Like, why do you think it's so low on people's priority lists that are involved with either branding or campaigns or activations on the whole?
I think the easiest way to explain it, have you ever watched an ad on your social media or even on TV that you have questioned because of the sound choice? So I'm thinking, I can think of like so many corporate brands, for example, that have really nice looking footage, and they've got just one of those really cheesy stock music tracks that just screams like tech company, or it screams like, we found this for free on YouTube. And it's like this kind of glossy, nobody ever connects to that kind of stuff. If anything, I think it turns a lot of people off. So I guess I'd probably answer your question with a question of, have you ever watched a piece of content and you've just felt so disconnected from it because it was just really bland, or it just felt really corporate? I was like, oh, I feel like they're selling something to me. And that was because of the sound being used. I think most people would say, I never thought about it being the sound. But now I think about it.
You answered my question with a question, and you're answering that question.
No, because mine was rhetorical. I was just saying, like, I'm speaking to the audience here. I know you know the benefit because we work together at a sound agency. No, this is like it's a rhetorical question of, I think most people will not have been aware that it was sound, but emotionally felt disconnected. And I think that's where we end up with a lot of people in these conversations, is
because it is felt, isn't it? That's the thing. It's felt. Like, yeah. And I think the interesting point that we wanted to touch on in this, that proves the impact, scientifically proves the impact of it, is there's a research paper by Caltech University in California where they found out that the brain responds it's like 1,000 times faster to auditory stimulation than it does to visual.
Wasn't it 100 million?
It could be. Yeah, 1,000's enough for me to get it. I'm happy to get it wrong on the low side. It could have been as high as that. I'm not going to pull the paper up now. I'm just going to run with it. Than it does to visual. And so before you even see something, your brain has already been affected by the sound of it. Yeah. And like, if you actually think about that, that's crazy. So that means that sound is the first impact. It's not, does it have impact? And it's just a nice to have. It's like, no, it is. If you think about impact is the initial, what would it be? The initial interaction with something. That is the impact. Like if you had a spear impacting through some ground or something, yes, the whole spear would go through, but the impact would be the tip of the spear. Sound is like the tip of the spear, not to be too dramatic.
Ooh,
going back to the gladiator reference.
Dramatic. I like it.
Yeah. And I will die with a spear. And so it's like, it is the impact.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's actually worth us just touching in on some of the stats that we talk about with people. If you're not a stats person, I'll make sure this is brief. But I think it's the easiest way to prove we're talking here about like, it's not just a nice to have. Because if we're thinking as in terms of like a tool, a branding and marketing tool, what you want that impact to do is make people remember you more. So you're front of mind whenever they're looking for that particular product that you sell or that particular service that you sell. Or it's to make people feel more connected. You know, as an example we always use is if you're like targeting an 18 to 25-year-old demographic, don't be using Elton John because that generation now barely even know who Elton John is. So they're going to feel a disconnect. I guess it's more important to think about the emotion of the song that's being used. But what you're doing with the music selection is you're giving people an impression of your company, and their reaction subconsciously is this product for me? And if you're using tracks that don't match that, the example you gave, I can't remember if it was on a client call, but you said, if your brand requires you to be using like death metal music, then don't be using country music that is what you listen to at home, because you're going to be speaking to the wrong audience. You need to be leaning in and using the death metal music, because that's what your audience responds to. That's where their audience, that's where they feel connected. That's their tribe, let's say.
And it's also almost, not to reduce that, but it's also almost irrelevant to this podcast. Like this whole thing is just to prove that it has impact. And so it's like, the impact can be positive and the impact can be negative. It's almost irrelevant, but it's basically just saying that if you don't think music has an impact, then we're here to prove that wrong, or to discuss around the idea that it might not. But I mean, it's going to get a yes from me that it does have impact, obviously. Stat me.
So Adweek, very reputable place to go searching for info. They saw a 24% higher return on investment than ads without integrated sonic branding or bespoke elements. So there's a return where music actually had an impact.
Cash, money.
Spotify. So we get into like, oh, hey, you're listening properly now on Spotify. 75% of 18 to 24-year-olds say music helped them feel more connected to a brand. 75%. Sound Out. Very reputable in the music side of the industry, but 12% increase in long-term revenue due to a stronger emotional connection and brand loyalty with the choice of music. So 12%. There's a couple there. Crazy. TikTok, I think, is an interesting one, that they're running their own research on this. But branded content with custom sound or music is 8 times more likely to be remembered by users compared to content with no sound or generic stock music, which is interesting thinking about our podcast last week. 8 times, like that's a lot. And the final one, actually Spotify for Brands has got an interesting one here. Unlike video or visual media, audio allows us to consume content without interruption, which is why 79% of listening occurs when we're multitasking. So if you think about it in that sense as a tool, it's not just a nice to have, like you're missing out on a whole demographic of people that are consuming content now whilst they're doing other things. So it's not just a nice to have in that situation. It's actually like a bit of a crucial, you're missing out on an audience there if you're not using it. So that's a bit more of like an out there stat, but I find that interesting in itself. Yeah, that's a large amount of people.
And I think the biggest takeaway for me that I would love people to take away, funnily enough, is the reframing of sound as a tool. You use copy at your brand or your business as a tool to get people to engage emotionally with whatever you're selling, service or product. You're using typeface, font, colors for your visual branding. They're just tools. Some people are using scents, etc. But sound is just another tool to add to that. But it's like you were just saying, if you're not using it, then you're missing out. But there's also no other way to get that value, which is why we're always saying unlocking value only sound can. Because you can't unlock that 24% increased connection with brands by redesigning your logo visually. Like that's just not going to happen. It's not going to affect the same part of the brain
part.
when it comes to engaging with a brand. So it's like
Yeah.
you are just if you're listening to this thinking our visual branding is amazing, we are hitting all of our targets, we're incredible, but the boards still want more. If you're not using sound, like that is how you can unlock this essentially like hidden value to a lot of people, isn't it? We were always talking to people about it. So it's not just like, I can get that from another part of what I'm comfortable with. It's like, it's a tool.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing you say there, like with what I'm comfortable with. So I think visuals, like even social media now and video is a given. A lot of people understand it now. 10 years ago, people didn't understand, video content with social media. That was a very new way of thinking and an unknown that a lot of people were scared with. So imagine what agencies were trying to say then to get people on board to like, you should be looking into video, or you should be looking into social media, full stop. Don't think about video, just think about social media. That's now a norm. And so people are very familiar in knowing how visuals are those tools that unlock value in terms of a visual aspect. So the conversation is a lot more rare than to think about sound in the same avenue, in the same way. And I'd be interested to know in 10 years, is sound going to be just like, a common thing that everyone just has as part of their marketing plan? Everyone has social media as part of the marketing plan now as a standard given. Yeah. But sound isn't. But yeah, I agree, because
everything uses sound. That's the thing as well, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
I can understand if people didn't want to use sound if we were 20 years ago and you weren't going to be running radio ads and you weren't going to be running TV ads, then you really didn't have any, and you were just selling a product, then yes, you probably didn't really need to think about sound. But if you are a brand that is at all involved with social media, and you're selling stuff online, then you are using video content, then you already have sound. Like we always say, everyone has a sonic branding strategy already. You might just not have an intentional one, and it's all just happenstance, and you're hoping it's going to work out for you. It's like it's been created for you just by chance.
Yeah, we've made a real great partnership recently with a guy called Joe Sauer, who is world leading in what he does in terms of his research and testing. And he was telling us a really interesting story about BMW were seeing a decline in how people were responding to the brand. And I think it was 6 months after launching their sonic branding was when they were doing all this testing. And it took them 6 months to realize and work out that it was actually the sound of the company that was the cause of this decline that they'd seen. They were testing their visuals, they were testing, socials, all these other elements that they were putting out into the world, because it's complex to think about every little element that a brand is putting out into the world and testing which one is not being favorable for them. But it was sound, and they had to go back to the board and like redesign and edit and tweak. I think he gave us another example.
I think
Nissan,
they just cut it. Yeah, Nissan,
yeah. So that's the power of it as well, and people aren't just brands aren't just putting stuff out into the world and just hoping for the best anymore. They are actually like attributing some of this decline or positives, increases to the sound that they are using and being able to prove it as well. I think that's the difference now. We're getting to the world where science is able to help us determine whether or not sound is having a positive or negative impact. And for us to even be in that place in the first place is credit to the impact that sound has, and why we shouldn't be just thinking about it as a nice to have or a little bonus to throw onto a video after it's been edited together. Like, that decision is going to have an impact on your brand. And we're here to make people conscious of that decision rather than it being subconscious.
Yeah. Okay. I agree.
That's a cute little conclusion there, wasn't it?
Yeah. Wow. How succinctly put.
Yeah.
So, do you have anything else to add to that? Or just can I ask you a question?
What, around the roundup question?
Yeah. I want you need the yes or no.
Yes.
Is that the answer to my question? So, as the number 5 misconception about sonic branding, sound has no impact. It's more of a nice to have. Do you say that's true, or do you say that's false, George Holliday?
I would say that is false. And I really, really hope that in 10 years' time, what we've discussed today, 10 years' time, we're in a very different industry and people are seeing that we are living in a sound-on world now.
Yeah, I think people are. And I think that's the interesting thing with the brands that we get to work with is that they're getting the impact. Hey, see what I did there? They're getting the competitive advantage, which is what we're always trying to tell people. It sounds like we're just trying to sell what we do, obviously like, oh, it'll do this, it'll do that. But it's like, it's an untapped tool. Just like if you started on YouTube 10 years ago and you were consistent and you had a plan and a strategy, you would now be one of the biggest YouTubers in your industry, whatever you chose, because you got ahead of the curve and you beat people there and you were first to market. So it's like sound is that opportunity now, particularly when you use it to the depth that we do with brands strategically. So 100% impact. 100%.
And I'm sure everyone listening to this podcast is trying to find ways to stand out amongst the noise. We're bombarded with so many pieces of content now, and from so many angles as well. And so I think we are like, our bullshit radar as a society, as a global society is incredibly high. So every little detail is something we're all analyzing subconsciously. And we have such a short attention span to anything that's not tapping into our interests or aligning with our personal goals, our personal values. And I think that is probably why we're seeing a massive shift. And I think not just in sound, just in everything in terms of what people are putting out into the world.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting point. Yeah, which I feel like there is a shift now. I have nothing but my own thoughts to base this off, so there will be no scientific stats as per George Holiday here. But it feels like there's a movement towards less content, but of higher value. And I think that's indicative of like consideration that every piece does reflect a brand. And so it's like, do you want to just be scattergunning, machine gun firing out content just to try and keep up with an algorithm? Or do you want each piece to sort of really represent you? And if you want the latter, then it's all starting to be a bit more considered and sound as part of that considered strategy is an essential part that I think we'll start to see in the coming years more clearly.
Yeah, definitely. I think our emotional radar as well as our bullshit radar is pretty high. So for a piece of content to actually, cut through the noise and grab our attention on a deeper level, I think, brands are so much talking about brand experience and how people feel with the brand. And like how you feel with the brand is an emotional kind of value, I guess, in some way.
It's all emotion,
so
100%.
It's all emotion. So how do you tap into that? Like what was I watching yesterday? Oh, I'm currently in Portugal and I was at basically like a national park place, and we stumbled across a harpist and a classical guitar player who were just about to do this hour-long concert. I saw that. It was totally for free. Yeah, they were part of the Lisbon Film Orchestra. And we sat there and it just moved me so much. Like it was such a nice separation. One of those experiences where you walk back into the world and you're like, well, people are just like living their day-to-day lives out here. And we just had that amazing experience. And I think that's almost like that's an extreme version of how brands, I think, want to be tapping into an audience now.
It's that immersive aspect as well that I think you see so many immersive experiences happening with brands and activations, and they're trying to take you into that world. And like you just touched on, is there any greater trigger for an emotional reaction than sound in the world? I would say no. I don't think there is.
No, I agree with that. I think I've seen people get emotional more around music than most other things. And even when you're talking about films or a visual piece of art, I can't think of one where there hasn't been sound that's probably been a massive impact. Like if you think of your favorite part in a movie, what was the 100%. Soundtrack at the time that you were feeling emotional 100%. Towards it?
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's
something everyone can relate to.
Yeah, and I think if you break it down to that, at the end of the day, you're trying to make people connect with your brand. People connect with emotions. What triggers emotions quickest? Sound.
Mic drop.
Bitches.
Expensive mic drop.
Yeah. Drop and then just catch it underneath here. Yeah.
And everyone's headphones have just exploded.
Great. Done.
Great. Is there anything else you want to add before we leave?
Goodbye.
Goodbye.